Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. Thank you very much for joining us today for our NetGains NetAsset webinar. Just going to quickly kick off as we do have quite a lot of content to cover. There will be a recording available of this webinar that will be available for sharing at the end. And of course, if you have any questions about anything that you see today, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We will have some time for Q&A at the end. So we will get to all of your questions if we can by the time we finish the webinar. So we'll just kick off today with a very quick introduction. So there are some people on here today, many people on here that are Fusion 5 customers already, but there's also quite a few people that may or may not know who we are. So just a quick background on Fusion 5. Fusion 5 are a business applications company and a professional services company based in Australia and New Zealand. We have 9 offices around ANZ, supporting over 1,200 customers across all of the applications that we service. There's 750 employees onshore in ANZ for Fusion 5. And as you probably know, we are a Oracle NetSuite partner. We've been Partner of the Year now for Oracle NetSuite for 9 years in a row. And we are the largest Oracle NetSuite partner in the JPAC region and the 3rd largest globally. Today, we're talking a little bit about NetAsset and advanced asset management in NetSuite. We've put this webinar together because the topic of fixed asset management and the management of these items inside NetSuite is something that's quite a popular topic. A lot of our clients have a lot of requirements in relation to this that may not necessarily be met by the base system. So today we'd really like to introduce the team over at NetGain to present the advanced functionality of NetAsset. So Fusion 5 and NetGain have a long-standing partnership, which we're really excited to talk about the expansion of that partnership moving forward as well. But I won't steal Josh's thunder. I'll hand over to Josh now, and we can talk. We can introduce NetGain as a organization, talk about the products that they have and how they augment NetSuite, and talk a little bit about how we can assist anybody that has requirements in this area. So I'll hand over to Josh now. Actually, I'm going to hand over to Tanner.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. I'm Josh Peterson. I am the General Manager of Asia Pacific for NetGain, and excited to be on the call here. We've really appreciated the partnership that we have with Fusion 5 and the work that we've been able to do together. We'll be talking about our fixed asset solution today, advanced fixed asset solution, but also want to recognize, largely due to the work that we've done with Fusion 5, we are establishing an office in Sydney, Australia. So I will be moving out in February with a team to run things for NetGain. So we're really excited about the future that we have in the ANZ region along with Fusion 5. I'll turn the time over to Tanner now to run through a demonstration of the product.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Josh. It's good to be with everybody. I'm sad to say that I will not be joining Josh in Australia, but I was fortunate enough to be in Australia for a couple of weeks last week, which was incredible, especially since I live in the United States in a state called Utah, where it's winter for us now. So it was a nice change to be in some warmth. But a little bit of background of NetGain here. So at NetGain, we have our roots in NetSuite. Our founders came over from NetSuite originally, and we build native suite applications. You may have heard the term native before. What that means is the entire solution resides on the NetSuite platform. So NetSuite's allowed us to build directly on their platform. So there's no integrations required. Everything's housed right on top of NetSuite. So benefits from a data security perspective, functionality, as well as user familiarity. But a little bit of background. So today we of course are going to be digging into NetAsset primarily. Just wanted to briefly show a few of our other tools that are available should you ever have the need. We have a lease accounting tool to help you become compliant with lease accounting standards, a loan tool for both the lender and borrower side of the house to automate the accounting there. We have a close solution we call NetClose to help with closing the books. From task management to accruals to flux analysis. And we also have what we call a shared transaction tool, which I'll actually show very briefly at the end, which is our tool to allow you to split transactions and allocate those transactions across different entities. But NetAsset, our advanced fixed asset management, like Josh had mentioned, like Joel had mentioned, we built this out to relieve some pains of sometimes what's available in legacy solutions. And so that's what we'll be jumping through today. I'm pulling up my NetSuite instance here, and kind of to give you a little bit of the lay of the land and to set the table a little bit. So what you're seeing in front of you right now, this is my NetSuite instance. Everything I'm highlighting here, this is all native NetSuite. So this should be fairly familiar to you. Over here is where our tools live when they're downloaded. So they'll live right here on the center tab inside of NetSuite. All the functionality will be housed in this dropdown. But to give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm headed, I'll show you around just navigationally within NetAsset, and then I'll walk through the process of creating an asset, creating a schedule, doing some modifications to that asset, as well as showing you some of the reporting that comes out of the box, as well as along the way point out common use cases that we see among customers of where NetAsset can really help ease the load of managing fixed assets. So what you're seeing here, this is our dashboard page inside of NetAsset. This page is very flexible in that it can be configured to your liking. Just similar to any dashboard inside of NetSuite, you can move the portlets around, bring in some pertinent information related to your fixed asset management. From this dropdown, this is where you'll access everything, starting with this NetAsset help. This will direct you to a full knowledge base, kind of a walkthrough guide of how to use the tool, walkthrough videos, as well as covering less common topics that you may not come across frequently and you need an easy to access guide available. This setup, this is where the implementation process takes place, which Joel's team at Fusion 5 does a fantastic job of getting clients stood up in NetAsset very seamlessly. Some of the things that'll take place up front will be creating depreciation methods, mapping different asset types, setting up capitalization thresholds to auto expense if an asset doesn't meet that capitalization threshold. Down here, this is where you'll access your full asset register and can navigate to each individual asset record, which I'll jump into here in a moment. This is where you can create a new asset, perform many of the functions in bulk, including uploading all of your assets initially and generating all of your depreciation schedules. This is where you typically come on a monthly basis for whichever cadence that you're running your depreciation journals and run all of those in mass at once. And this is where all of the reporting will live. And so I'll jump through some of each of these as we walk through and create an asset together so that you can see the full life cycle of an asset. So to start, I'll jump over here to create a new asset. So 3 different ways that we allow inside a NetAsset to create an asset. You can create that asset from scratch. So this would be the case if you don't have a bill, don't have an invoice that you're now capitalizing, you're creating it fresh. Probably the less common use case. More commonly, you'll be creating an asset from either proposals or a clearing account or something like a construction in progress account. They'll both function the same way, but allows you the ability to have 2 different holding GL accounts for your fixed asset subledger. So I'll come in here and I'll open up our create from proposals screen. And so the way we set this up was in an effort to follow the logical flow of an asset lifecycle, where typically you're receiving a bill, and that bill needs to be housed somewhere until it's ready to be capitalized, depreciation schedules are set up. And so what I'm showing on this screen here is all of the bills, all of the transactions, the journal entries that have been coded to this construction in progress asset account. Again, you can label it what you'd like and assign the GL account that's going to make the most sense for you, and use the verbiage that's consistent with your company. But what you'll see up above, all of these allow you to filter through this large listing of transactions that are just waiting to be placed into service and start being depreciated. Commonly, we see folks using these filters for projects. Maybe you have a large asset project where you're setting up, you have a lot of different expenses coming through. You want to capitalize those all into one asset. You can select it as a project and capitalize all the transactions from there, or by specific vendor or specific asset type. And that will filter this listing down below. To point out a couple things on this, so you'll notice the column headings, you got your asset name, your date, transaction, just to make sure that we're showing you the full life cycle. I'm going to open up a bill, which was kind of the genesis of this. So this is just a native NetSuite bill, nothing fancy here. The only thing is that we've coded it to our fixed asset construction in progress account. Add an amount, added a memo. Here you can add, whatever you would normally inside of your bills. And you can also tag it directly to an asset from here. But I'll jump back to this proposal screen, which will be kind of the standard workflow. I'll select 2 of these line items. So I can select one or multiple. And then I'll have the option to create a single asset from these transactions or mass create assets, which would mean I'm going to create 2 separate assets in bulk. I'm going to go ahead and create a single asset. And this is going to open up an asset record for me. So here's our asset record. Some of the different areas will be populated based on the bill information that we selected, such as this acquisition date. This in-service date will default to the acquisition date. This capitalized asset value in service, that's going to be the sum total of the 2 separate line items that we selected. And then I'm going to name this as Fusion 5 webinar example. So this is going to be our asset name. And then from here is where we can select our asset type. Again, you can select that at the bill level if you know that right when you receive the bill, or you can select it at this point in the process. And I'm going to select vehicles right here. So upon selecting vehicles, my depreciation method has populated with the default straight line depreciation method, which we set up and which would normally be set up during the implementation process. You can always override that depreciation method and use any of those that come out of the box in here. Or if you have a less common depreciation method that you use, anything can be uploaded via a table or by using a formula. So you can customize the depreciation methods to the extent that you need. And then over here, it's going to populate our subsidiary based upon the bill. We can specify an accounting book, add some different notes here. I can add a photo. And then down below, again, the acquisition date is going to default to what was on the bill, but I can override that. Maybe I want this to actually be capitalized next year. And you can set up rules to align with your accounting team's policy of to capitalize 1 month after purchase date or 2 months, whatever the case may be there. So in-service date, we spoke to this already, this useful life at in-service. This is also a default input based upon our asset type. We can, of course, change that if we need to, but that'll help just streamline the process a little bit. But at this point, we have everything we need to go ahead and save the asset. And that's going to create the asset record for us, and will then prompt us to start generating a depreciation schedule. It's first going to kick us back to this proposal screen, assuming that we have more assets to capitalize. I'm going to jump in to the asset record that we just created. So here's our asset record. You'll notice a few buttons up here. I'm going to go ahead and select Generate Schedule. And that's going to kick off the process for processing the depreciation schedule, which will serve as our sub-ledger through the whole life of the asset. Something to point out on these buttons, you can get very granular in your user permissions and segregation of duties. And so with generating depreciation schedule, capitalizing the asset, you can set up different user roles and permissions consistent with NetSuite to have those appropriate changes. I'll also point out that I'm doing this for one singular asset at the moment and generating the depreciation schedule. More than likely, when you're initially getting stood up in the system or when you have a lot of different asset purchases coming through, you would come in here, select generate depreciation schedules, and that would allow you to kick off the process in mass so that you don't have to sit and do it for each individual asset. I'm going to refresh this here. It looks like our depreciation schedule is ready. So if I scroll down, kind of show you around this, fairly simple depreciation schedule. You have your period start date and end date, your gross asset value, that's going to be consistent through the life, your running accumulated depreciation, your straight line depreciation expense through the life, and then your net book value. So again, this is our subledger. Nothing's hit the GL at this point yet. You'll notice this journal entry column is blank. Once we start running journals, those will be populated next to the expected line item. So up above here, I'm going to select Q for capitalization. So again, that's just an additional step where you can set up user permissions, and then I'm going to capitalize so that maybe you have a preparer preparing the asset record and a reviewer coming in and actually performing the capitalization. And now what we have showing is our journal entry processing screen. So from here, I can select the period for which I want to run journals. I'm going to run journals for a few months in advance, just to give you some visibility into what a capitalization journal entry looks like, and then a couple subsequent depreciation expense journals. So I select create journals. Now this is going to be the first point where we're actually impacting the GL. Up until this point, it's just been creating the asset record, generating the depreciation schedule. Now we're hitting the GL. And again, this is just for one asset for illustrative purposes. In practice, you'll come in here, select Run Monthly Asset Journals. You'll see a full listing. You'll be able to select all assets that you'd like to run journals and the month for which you want to run them through. And I'll kick that off. And a separate journal entry will run for each individual asset, which plays an important role when you get into reporting and wanting to have more dynamic and robust reporting. Let's refresh this. And so here are our journals that have now been posted to the GL. I can drill into each one of those journals here, or I can jump back to the asset record. I can see where those journals are now living, right next to the line item on the depreciation schedule. And so that you can keep track of where you are at any given point in the asset lifecycle. I will say we do have controls in place so that you will not run journal entries on top of each other. The system won't allow you to do so, but you can adjust if a journal was booked in error or something like that. So but I'll open up a couple of these journals to give you some visibility into what these journals look like once they're run. So fairly simple journals. These are custom journals. They'll be labeled as NetAsset journals so that you can find them easily in your GL detail. And this is what the journal entry looks like. You're capitalizing in this case. We're moving it from our CIP account here and pushing it into our automotive equipment account now that it's been placed in service. This column here is how it's linking back to the actual asset record. Then jumping into the first month of depreciation, we have $972 hitting depreciation expense, as well as hitting our accumulated depreciation. Now, part of the initial setup, which will be done through here and managing asset types. If I were to open this page, this would allow me to see the GL mapping that I have associated with each asset type. So to provide comfort there, you can code the asset to whatever your chart of accounts is, and you can change that as you go forward. So, but those are the asset journals, fairly simple journal entries. The power comes that when you have all of these asset records and you get into the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands and more of assets, that you can come in and process all of those journals at once. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of an asset record, setting up the depreciation schedule, showing you the journal entries that are being booked. Now I'll jump into a couple of these buttons that are now available for us up above, and then after which I'll point to some of these sub tabs. So At this point, we have a handful of different options. We can further depreciate the asset. And again, probably will not be doing this at the asset record level. You'll be doing that in mass on a monthly basis. This revalue option, this will allow you to do what you'd expect. So open up an asset record, adjust the asset value, whether that be up or down, depending on what the accounting standards you follow allow. And the system will then book a journal for you to adjust for the asset change. You can dispose of the asset. The disposal will allow you to dispose it as kind of an asset that's just no longer in service and you don't intend to sell, but also will allow you to, I'll actually open this up to point this out. This will allow you to dispose of the asset in the form of a sale to a customer or to a different party. And so this will walk you through the process of disposing of the asset. I can select my disposal quantity. If I have on my asset record multiple assets, then I can specify how many of those assets I want to sell, specify the asset value being sold. I can specify the cash I received to dispose of the asset. Profit and loss will be computed for me, and the gain and loss journal entry will also be computed. I can also generate an invoice for you there. That's disposing of an asset. Transferring of an asset, very similar workflow. Open up this button. It'll allow you to transfer to different subsidiaries across your organization, and it will fall in line with native NetSuite intercompany functionality. This buildup, I'll actually walk through an example of this just because this is such a common need with fixed assets. But before doing that, also, you can place the asset on hold. Should you pull this vehicle out of service, you no longer want to depreciate it for the next few months, place it on hold. You can split the asset. Maybe you've bought a fleet of vehicles, originally capitalized it as one asset. You want to split that out. That can be done here. And this is where you can create an alternate schedule. Alternate schedules are commonly used to track both your reporting accounting, whether that be IFRS, Australian GAAP, US GAAP, as well as tax reporting. So if you want to keep track of your different statutory requirements there, you can create an alternate schedule, and that schedule will be housed right over here. But I'm going to jump in. Let's build up this asset a little bit more because this is such a common use case among those we run into that, hey, we've built up an asset. Now we're expanding on that asset, increasing the useful life. How can we do that? So upon selecting build up asset, it kicks me back to this construction in progress clearing account page where we started. Though now it's going to do some automated filters to be in line with the asset that we selected. So it's populating right there. If I scroll down, then I can look at and select what I'd like to capitalize on top of this asset. So I'm going to select this bill. This is a separate bill. It's an engine. Maybe we're replacing the engine on this truck. So I'm going to select this, select build up asset. And now this specific bill is going to be added on top of this asset's gross value. So it'll take a moment to do so, but you'll notice that the gross asset value right now is $35,000. And I didn't point this out previously, but the records or the bills that we use to capitalize on this asset are found in this related records sub-tab right here. You can see the exact bills as a full audit trail of what was used to capitalize the asset. And then once the system's done processing that buildup, that additional transaction will also show up here. So I'll refresh this. Upon building up the asset, it's going to adjust the schedule prospectively. And so you can see it started to process. It's still processing a little bit. Let me refresh that one more time. And now if we scroll down, we can see these additional decimal periods that have been added to reflect the buildup. So here's our buildup entry. We've brought in an additional 10,000, increasing the gross asset value. And on a go-forward basis, you'll see that depreciation expense will no longer be 972. It's going to be the new straight line expense through the remaining life of the asset. Looks like it's still processing a little bit. Let me refresh that one more time. And now you see the consistent depreciation expense through the end of the asset's life. If I scroll to this next page, you'll see the net book value winding down all the way to 0. So let's open up that build-up entry just to close the loop here. So fairly simple again. This is just capitalizing, adding to the automotive equipment GL account, as well as removing it from the construction in progress account. If we jump back here, if I open up this related records, now you can see that additional bill line item that has now been added to the asset right there. So we run into a lot of customers that express some frustration of not being able to do that in other systems. And so kind of as a result, we built out a lot of this functionality just because of different demand and different questions that we got in the market. So that's how a build up works. If in any event that you build up or you revalue an error, not that any of us ever would do something like that, we've added functionality to reverse a revaluation or reverse a buildup to unwind what was just performed. So lastly, I'm going to depreciate this one more time, and then I'll show you the split functionality. So that's also a common use case that we see. So now it's going to prompt me to the next month that we have not yet run journals for. I'll create journals here. And then that journal will take a moment to run. While we're waiting, I'm going to jump back to the NetAsset record here and kind of point out a couple other things that might be of use on this related record subtab. So I showed you that all the bills are showing that we use to build up the asset. In addition to that, you can also set up parent-child relationships with assets. So example of that may be, one example is we have a customer that is in the business of renting out medical equipment, and the medical equipment is in different packages and a lot of different components to each of these medical equipment packages. So in their case, they utilize the parent asset as kind of the base asset to hold all of the different components. And then they have multiple different child assets so that they can keep specific track of each item within that package, and then they can transfer it to and from different packages, because often they're replacing something but not the full package. So that's kind of where this parent-child asset comes into play. The children asset will show up here, parent asset will show up here, and you'll see how that populates once I split this asset. Additional areas, inventory serial numbers, you can associate it with different leases or loans, and as much as that's applicable for you, but I won't jump into that further. So let me refresh this and then walk through an asset split for us so that you can see the parent-child functionality there. So I'm going to select split, and in this case, well, I forgot to do this on the asset record because currently we have one asset quantity in there. So I'll pretend like this is 2 and then just split it into 2 separate assets. We have 2 separate trucks. Upon clicking 2, it's going to split those out evenly. If that's not a fair representation, I can always adjust this in here, either by a decimal like I'm doing here, or by specific quantities. And you'll notice that the useful life in service is going to continue from whatever it was. It's going to split the gross asset value, net book value, those sorts of things. I can also add notes, split trucks into 2 separate assets, something like that. And then once I click split, this will prompt the system to split this asset into 2 separate asset records. And so while it's processing the split, again, this will then present what the parent-child relationship looks like, and then it'll prompt us to go through the similar process that we just went through with the original asset, only it's going to now have us recapitalize those assets and regenerate the depreciation schedules for each of the assets. And they'll all be linked together through the process so you can keep track of what the original asset was, as well as the resulting split of the asset. So again, here, this walking through the process again, Q for capitalization. I can capitalize this here. It's going to bring me to this screen. I'll just create journals for that capitalization journal entry, since we've already run through what some of the depreciation entries look like. Refresh this, and I'll jump back to this asset record so I can show you how this asset, which has now been split, is showing the relationships. So here's the original parent asset. If I open up that parent asset here, you'll see the depreciation schedule that we originally were going through that has now been cut off because of this split entry that was booked. From here, you'll see the child assets showing up. If I go back to this child asset, there's not going to be any child assets because this is the parent asset, but you can have multiple levels of generations, if you will. So, but at this point, now I want to just point out a couple of these sub-tabs that are worth mentioning, and then I'll jump into some of the fixed asset reporting that's available. So of course, depreciation schedule is available. Once that's run, you'll see that populated down below. Related records we've been touching on. This accounting sub-tab, this is where you can add different segmentation to capture where that depreciation expense should be hitting. Here's some of the physical asset detail. You'll notice because we split it, the quantity is now 0.5. Of course, if you had 3 or 4 trucks that you split across different assets, the resulting quantity could be a full number. But all of these details, these are all very flexible. You can change the naming. You can add or take away. Maybe often we see customers wanting to capture an asset tag ID or a serial number. That can all be captured here. We actually have a serial number field right here. And then anything that's in here can then be reported on because it's attached to the asset. So your native NetSuite reporting, saved searches can be run off of any of these records. Some of these other sub-tabs, probably less relevant. We have a usage depreciation methodology, if that's ever a need. We have some crypto clients, that's why that's there. Asset management. This kind of lends itself to some short-term rentals, in as much as you have assets that are in that space. That's a whole different conversation. Maintenance records can be stored here. If you want to plan for maintenance, you can actually add maintenance records. Select your maintenance type. Maybe you have preventative that's coming up. It's an oil change, add a description, expected maintenance date, and then have the system prompt whoever's in charge of taking care of that maintenance to get it scheduled. And then once scheduled, you can check it off that the maintenance has been performed. Documentation is where you can add different PDF files, different Excel files, whatever supporting documentation you need, and that'll coincide with NetSuite's filing cabinet. Any revaluations, any disposals, this is where alternate schedules will be housed. We have it labeled as federal tax schedule. These names can be changed depending on the different schedules that you're intending to track in the system. Allocations, different property information, and then of course a whole audit trail of what's available here. A couple of these are a little bit more nuanced. So, but that's kind of the ins and outs of an asset record. Have the ability to have one depreciation schedule, multiple depreciation schedules, that secondary depreciation schedule in the event that it's a tax depreciation schedule. You can have it not hitting a GL account, or if you have multi-book enabled, maybe you're reporting under multiple different financial reporting standards, you can have those journals run concurrently with each other and being applied to the appropriate set of books. So it is multi-book enabled. But with that, I'm going to jump into some of the reporting that will be available out of the box. And I'm going to exit out of some of these. So out of the box, you'll have somewhere in the range of 60 reports. And a lot of different reports in here, categorized by admin reports, reconciliation reports here, subledger reports. You'll notice the descriptions to the right. I'll show you just a couple of these that tend to be most widely used. This first one will be this asset register roll forward report. And I'll also show you a waterfall report, which is commonly used for reporting. purposes and filing your financials as well as forecasting. So what I'm showing here, this is our asset roll forward report, kind of what you'd expect in a roll forward report, showing the asset types to the left-hand side of an asset ID. If I were to drill in, the asset ID is going to show up. Asset name, the GL account, the accumulated depreciation account, the currency that it's in. It can show multiple different currencies. Beginning gross balance, beginning accumulated depreciation balance, and scrolling to the right, you have your fixed asset additions, depreciation, disposals, revaluations, and your ending gross asset balance, as well as your ending accumulated depreciation balance. Now, this report is fully drillable. So as you saw, this is the higher level. I can drill down into my different subsidiaries. And if I drill down here, I can drill right into a specific asset as well as the specific journal entry that's making up this balance. Down below here are the filters available. I can filter by subsidiary, by accounting period. Maybe I'll even just plug in a full fiscal year to provide a little more substance to this report. I'm going to select refresh. Now this report is going to show for the full fiscal year, but I of course can change that to whatever time period is relevant for me, as well as the export level. If I want the full hierarchy or the full drill down, and different ways to kind of pivot the report on different pieces of information here. But you'll notice that you can also filter by department, asset class. I can locate a specific asset and see what activity is going on with that asset. But again, this is now showing for the full fiscal year, beginning gross balance and then ending gross balance along with the accumulated depreciation. So that's our roll forward. This report is probably the most used report inside of NetAsset. And as I mentioned, you can export this. Oftentimes auditors are going to be asking for this report. You can export it, share it with your auditors, and go from there. Jumping over to the waterfall report. So here's our depreciation waterfall report. Right from the get-go, I'm going to open up these filters, and I'm going to filter for the full fiscal year so that they can provide a little bit more information. It's just showing for 1 month currently. I'll preview this report. And then this will be showing all of my asset types, the respective account numbers, as well as the expected depreciation on a go-forward basis. So this report is subledger driven because we're looking ahead of time. Our roll forward report was GL driven, actual journal entries being booked. But again, this report, similar to the roll forward report, fully drillable. I can drill right down to the specific asset if I want to see what's going on. So just a couple examples of the reports that are out of the box. We of course have many other reports. We have a full asset register, or you can jump into a register right here to navigate and find any and all of your assets that you have inside the system. So a full listing here, and you got your asset name, in-service date, some different information depending on where the asset is in its life cycle. So, but that is NetAsset. Probably the primary reasons for people considering NetAsset are number one, reporting. Number two is build up capabilities to build up with multiple bills, as well as continue to build up the asset through the life. Revaluing the asset or changing the depreciation useful life, as well as just overall flexibility and reporting and other things with NetAsset. So, but with that, I want to spend a little bit of time and showing you the little bonus that I mentioned of the shared transaction tool, which will allow you to split transactions across different entities and different subjects. But so the shared transaction tool, very simple tool. It will be housed right here. Once it's downloaded, you can actually download for free and play with in your Sandbox account by navigating to the Suite App Marketplace. But some of this is just some initial setup. I won't get into this too much. I want to leave enough time for some Q&A here. Make sure your questions are answered. So what I'll do, I'm just going to open up a bill. and I'll create a bill from scratch, just a simple bill here. So I'm first going to select my vendor, and then the subsidiary is going to auto-populate. I'm going to change the subsidiary for us, and then start adding just a dummy expense account down below here. And we'll say $10,000, example expense. So the common use case for this is, hey, maybe there's a parent company that's receiving a bill for some of its subsidiaries. It wants to then, parent company pays the bill, but wants to push the expense to the appropriate areas. And so once the expense is in here, and I'll save this bill. The only a couple things that you'll notice that are different with the shared transaction tool being enabled in your NetSuite environment is that this button will appear to allocate expenses, as well as this shared transaction subtab will appear. So from this example, say we have the $10,000 expense, I can then from here jump to this allocate expense worksheet and select my expense line item. And then down below here, I can either select one of my templates that I've set up to be kind of recurring splits that happen, or I can do the split kind of on a one-off basis from scratch. Or I can start from a template like I'm doing right here and push that to two different entities and kind of use it as a starting point. And then I can edit in here to change the weighting. Now the weighting is dynamically weighted. Oops. So it doesn't have to add up to 100. I can just put in 2 here, and then I click edit, I plug in 3. Now it's going to assign 40% weight to Acme USA and 60% to, in this case, it's actually going to remain at the entity that I originated the transaction in. But this dynamic weighting allows you to just assign specific dollar values here. And of course, you can change the GL account, add a memo, use any of these different segments, and custom segments are also supported. So I'll click save, and then I'll kick back to the original bill and show you the push that's taken place. So coming back here, we haven't touched the integrity of the original bill, but what we have added is now the shared transaction subtab is going to present the activity that's taken place. So what I'm highlighting here, this is the reversal of the original transaction to then be booked to a different entity. So you see that it's in reverse from this create demo cases subsidiary and then being rebooked to these subsidiaries. In this case, I accidentally selected the create demo case multiple times, so not a lot of value in doing that, but you can kind of still see the functionality of how now it's pushed a portion of this expense to the new entity and book the intercompany journals along with it. If I were to drill into this, this is an advanced intercompany journal inside of NetSuite, and you can see the activity happening here as well. And this will flow similar to your consolidation process of eliminating intercompany journals, as well as capturing the due to, due from subsidiary information. And should you open this from a GL detail, it's tied back to the original bill, so I can always drill in and jump right back to the bill from which we created the original journal. So I showed you an allocate expense from the worksheet here. Alternatively, if you just have a one-to-one push, you can do that at the individual line item level here on the bill. If I were to come over to these different columns, I can select from the drop down here the subsidiary that I want to push the expense to, and upon saving, the advanced intercompany journal will be booked while still maintaining the original bill transaction there. So, but a lot of different uses for that. Most commonly, we see it among bills, but you can deploy it to many different transaction types inside of NetSuite. So just give you a little bit of a view of that. Here's the system setup. You can deploy it to bills or to normal journals, checks, credit card charges, invoices, sales orders, purchase orders, essentially any transaction type inside of NetSuite that could reasonably need an allocation pushed. So as simple as that though. So went through NetAsset, showed you kind of the full life cycle of how to create an asset, how to build up the asset, how to modify that asset once it's been placed in service, as well as showing you some of the reporting functionality, and then showing you the shared transaction tool, which allows you to split transactions at the individual line item level, and have the advanced intercompany journals be booked for you automatically. And again, it can be within the same entity, so it doesn't have to be advanced intercompany journals. If you're just pushing it to a different GL account or different segment, that is all supported as well. So, but with that, want to take a moment to field any questions that may have arisen from the chat. Joel, do we have any questions that have come through?
Yes, we do. Thanks, Tanner. And thank you very much for going through that presentation. Just a few questions in the chat, which we'll just field. Firstly, one of the questions asked was, is this a replacement for the fixed asset module in NetSuite? So I don't know, do you want to answer that one? Or do you want me to answer that one?
You can take it, Joel.
Yeah, sure. So the NetGain NetAsset module can be used in replacement to the fixed asset management module of NetSuite. We normally wouldn't recommend utilizing the two solutions together. It'll be a matter of picking one and going with that. Generally speaking, people will take the NetAsset module that is going to have the functionality that they require. And I think a follow-up question for that was, what are the key additional functions I might get yourself to take that one, Tanner, just to highlight some of the additional functionality incorporated in that solution?
Yes, yep, perfect answer, Joel. They do operate independently of each other. Some of the main differences that you'll notice is number one is going to be reporting. That's typically the first thing that people call out when they decide to start using NetAsset. Number two will be that build-up capability, building up multiple bills and having that full audit trail through the life of the asset, as well as adding bills at a later point. Another difference will be the multiple depreciation schedule capability, where you can have your primary depreciation schedule as well as a tax depreciation schedule or some other reporting jurisdiction schedule. And additionally, how the system works in its flow and booking journals for each individual line item for each individual asset, which then lends itself to kind of the more robust and flexible reporting as opposed to bulk posting of journals based on asset type, though that is an option with NetAsset, should you choose to do it in bulk. But the more granular each individual depreciation line item is what we'd recommend.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe also just touch on some of the import capabilities and midlife capabilities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything, pretty much anyone that would be starting to use NetAsset will have a ton of assets that are midlife depreciation. Templates can be uploaded via CSV like you would natively in NetSuite to bring over all those assets pretty seamlessly. You can select a go live date to start running depreciation on a specific date when you're ready to fully pull the trigger on the tool.
Great, thank you. Another question that was asked was how this application can be used to leverage for ICT assets like from servers and networking equipment, laptops, printers, etc. And user assigned equipment. Just having use cases for that and how that might be utilized in that circumstance.
Yes, so commonly we see, I'll even open this up to show you where that information is typically housed from our users. So let's pull up an asset example here. Essentially, you can attach any information, any user assignment to any asset, and then run reports off of those assignments. So typically in an asset record, we'll see that be used in this accounting sub-tab. Let's see if we have any. It looks like we don't have any user field populated currently, like this asset tag ID as an example. but you can easily just add user assignment. When that user assignment changes, you can track those changes so that you can see who has what when, as well as locations is a popular way to track things.
Awesome, thank you. There was another question around just back when we were looking at some of the reporting. There was just a question as to whether or not the reports that are in there do reconcile with the GL&T and trial balance in NetSuite.
Yes, they do. So I'll open this up to show you. So that roll forward report that I was showing, that one is a reconciliation report. It's a GL report, meaning that it's driven by journal entries. So anything in that report is a result of a journal entry that was booked. Even if it's a one-off journal entry and you tag it to the asset, it'll be pulled through that report. The report that I showed, which was the forward-looking waterfall report, that's subledger driven. So that one won't reconcile back to the GL because those journals haven't been booked.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. I think there was also a follow-up question around the, in fact, there's two questions which are essentially the same. Is it easy to move the data from the native module into NetAsset? And another question which kind of just says what's involved in converting from the current NetSuite fixed asset management module to NetAsset. So maybe if we could combine an answer to those two questions.
Sure. Happy to answer that. Joel, I know your team has expertise in that space too, so defer to you first, but happy to take the question there.
Yeah, sure. Maybe as I'm not in the delivery team, it might be easier if you answer that question.
Yeah. Well, to answer that, Fusion 5 does an excellent job, and they do that all the time, moving over assets from NetSuite's fixed asset module into NetAsset. But because it's done so frequently, it's a very easy process. It's actually probably the preference because all of it's easy to know how to pull those reports on our team, Fusion 5 team, so that we can easily drop that into NetAsset.
Yeah,
that was
I think one of the things that we do note there is there are some limitations in the native module in relation to bringing in assets that are mid-life, and some restrictions around importing. We don't face those restrictions inside the NetAsset module, so it's definitely a bit more of a seamless process than the original implementation of assets into the native NetSuite fixed asset management module. So if anyone's experienced some issues with that in the past, we should be expecting a much more seamless process from a conversion perspective. Cool. I'm just having a look through here to see if there's any questions we haven't covered. Just with the interoperability of the solutions for NetAsset and some of the other ones like NetLease, how interoperable are those two applications if people have leases that are associated with assets, etc.?
Interruptibility, is that referring to like system?
Interoperable. So
interoperability.
Sorry, this
yes.
is my strange Australian accent there.
No, I'm the dumb American here. No, so yes, they work very seamlessly with each other. Speaking to like the lease tool, the asset tool, the loan tool, maybe you're financing your assets. Even just to show you a little bit, so this related records subtab here, this is where you can house any of those. Maybe you're leasing this asset out and you have multiple leases associated with this asset. Those would all be associated here. I would then be able to open up the lease record for this asset and drill into the asset further. And maybe to jump on top of that, I'm financing this truck, then leasing it out. I can keep track of my loan, my asset, and my lease all together, and then run P&L statements based off all of that information. So probably a long-winded answer there, but
yeah, that's
well, I would say in addition to that, anything held within your NetSuite account, if you're wanting to pull any of that data onto records within our products, because we are native, we can pull that data over onto the records. And so very able to work between our products or native NetSuite as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Josh. Just another question in relation to the fixed asset management module in relation to cyclical maintenance or service cycles. Is there any functionality that exists inside the NetAsset tool that deals with anything like service schedules and things like that?
Yes, maybe this answers the question. This is getting a little bit beyond my wheelhouse, but it is a managed bundle with updates coinciding with NetSuite's biannual updates or twice a year, the updates that come with NetSuite. The release notes for those updates will be sent in advance to specified parties, which you can specify within NetAsset. You can choose to accept those updates or defer, have some flexibility there. But in terms
I'm
of
sorry,
general,
maybe I may have not phrased that question properly. We're talking about the actual asset itself. To say we have a vehicle that needs like an annual service, or we have like a piece of machinery that requires cyclical maintenance or anything like that. Is there any functionality to support that inside the application?
Yes, I apologize. I jumped to a different
No,
answer
that's okay.
there.
I was like, this is a bit of a differential way to answer a question, but no, that's okay.
Yes, so kind of regular maintenance that can be housed natively in here through this sub tab. You can create a maintenance record within here to capture some of that expected maintenance information, as well as then attach a subsequent bill invoice to kind of provide support that maintenance has been performed. You can also integrate with different field management service softwares as needed if it's more involved there. But yes, essentially, if it can integrate with NetSuite, it can integrate seamlessly with NetAsset too.
Fantastic. I think that is all of the questions we have here today. Obviously, we just wanted to thank everybody that's on this session for attending the webinar today. There will be a copy of this sent out to everybody that's registered for it. We know there's some people that weren't able to make it today, and this is some people that have requested copies to be circulated within their organizations. There were some questions around some of the other tools as well. Also some questions around IFRS 16 support for leases. So we will let people know that we can take them through a separate demo of some of those solutions if they want to see any of that as an outcome of this as well. So that's pretty much it for today. We're ending almost exactly on time, which is almost unheard of. So thank you very much, Josh and Tana, for attending the webinar with us today. Thank you very much, everyone that joined, and we will let you back a few minutes early to grab a coffee before your next meeting. So thanks very much, everyone, for attending.